Welcome back to the Murder Tapes Podcast, Season 4, Episode 7. Wilson and I just got back from New York and we had the best time. It is nothing like people say it is. Growing up, I was always told that the people there are so mean, but everyone was so nice and welcoming, and every place that we went into, we were greeted by either the owner or the co-owner, and it was just so hard to leave. We loved taking the subway everywhere. The buildings were beautiful, the weather was perfect, and I already miss it so much. But anyways, I hope you all had a great Christmas, and I'm wishing you all an amazing New Year. Today we're going to be discussing the murder of Joanne Nelson. Paul Dyson was born in August of 1974 to Christine and Peter Dyson. He had one younger sister and a half-brother. Paul was very close to his father, and when he was 17 years old, he spent a couple of months in Saudi Arabia with his dad and worked in general maintenance. He occasionally worked as a gardener and machinist as well for M&K Pine. On December 2, 2004, he began his employment at Bayram Timber on Somerden Road as a crosscut operative, where he was working at the time of his arrest. Although he was dedicated to his job, Paul's true passion lay in kickboxing. At the age of 15, he was introduced to martial arts expert Colin Allen by his father. Under Colin's guidance, Paul trained to achieve a brown belt, and in 1995, he served as a reserve for the British team at the World Kickboxing Championships. He later developed a strong interest in bodybuilding as well, which led him to use anabolic steroids, administering them through injections. Interestingly enough, Paul's father, Peter, also had a criminal background. He was sentenced to 6 years for the manslaughter of his wife's lover, 22-year-old John Dickinson. He stabbed him with a kitchen knife after an altercation in Barnsley in 1967. He was also involved in a fatal hit-and-run after he visited Paul when he was just 2 days old in the hospital. He ended up killing 47-year-old Gordon Kell while he was walking on his way home from celebrating his silver wedding anniversary with his wife and family. If you weren't aware, a silver wedding anniversary is celebrated after 25 years of being together. Peter didn't stop and left him dying in the middle of the road. He escaped prosecution and died at the age of 55 due to a heart attack in Saudi Arabia in 2000. And no one knows if Paul ever told Joanne about his father. Peter's death broke Paul, so he focused all his time on work. Paul and Joanne met while he was a doorman at bars and clubs, and she worked in a job center. He was 27 years old and she was 19. Her parents didn't like the idea of them moving in together, so they first moved into Paul's mom's house before they purchased a home in the city's Cottingham district. However, tensions began to rise due to his lack of tidiness and her more ambitious aspirations. While he juggled several low-paying jobs and supported his daughter, she was advancing in her career and spoke of traveling the globe. It is believed that he erupted in anger when she challenged him about doing the laundry. Paul told the police, quote, "She said I couldn't turn on the washing machine," which I couldn't. An argument reportedly escalated as they discussed the possibility of separating and selling their house, leading him to lose his temper. This case is known as the Valentine's Day murder because it is believed that Joanne was strangled on either the day before or day of Valentine's Day. On February 13th or 14th of 2005, 31-year-old Paul Dyson strangled his 22-year-old girlfriend, Joanne Nelson. According to Paul, the couple exchanged Valentine's Day cards, kissed, and cuddled before she left for work that Monday morning, but the truth was that he murdered her 3 days prior. He would tell reporters that he, quote, "loves her to bits and could never hurt her." Detective Ray Higgins paid close attention to his hands, and he noticed that he had 2 crescent-shaped cuts on his thumbs. These cuts are textbook throttling injuries and self-inflicted during the act of strangulation. The days following the missing report, police searched the home that they shared. He was caught on CCTV footage at the corner store buying trash bags and cleaning products just a day before he reported her missing. He also drove 100 miles in order to dispose of her body. He found an isolated woodland near Hovingham in North Yorkshire, where he carried her body 250 yards and placed her in a concealed dip in the pine trees. He also decided to come up with a plan to hide what he did. He even made a statement on live television, which I'm going to play for you really quick.
One morning, because I couldn't get Valentine's Day off, we swapped cards upstairs. Gave her a kiss and a cuddle, got ready for work. She's going to get her head down for another hour, so. What does Joanne mean to you? She didn't pay some trouble with. I don't know where she is.
Paul called authorities in Hull, England to report Joanne missing. During this phone call, he acted like he was worried, and when asked by police if they had gotten in an argument, he said, quote, "Nothing like that." Soon after, he left for work and staged a conversation with Joanne on the phone because his friend was around, and then he decided to call Joanne's parents for emotional support. He wept on her mom's shoulder and told her he hoped she returns, knowing he was responsible for her disappearance. Paul's mother called the police and turned her son in after his trainer, Colin, told her that he admitted to strangling Joanne after an argument over laundry. Judge Paul Worsley, QC, said, quote, "He made a mistake. He confided in someone whom he thought was so close of a friend that he would not breach his confidence. Paul Dyson told that man that he had killed Joanne. That person contacted Paul's mother, and she, responsibly, and you may think with some courage, went to the police. It was when confronted with that he admitted to police that he had lied. From the time he killed her, we submit Paul Dyson kept a callous and calculated charade, telling family and police alike that he had left Joanne in bed on Valentine's Day after they had exchanged Valentine cards and that he had gone to work, only to return that evening to find her missing. On the evidence, the prosecution contend that he felt that she was losing interest in him, and that he determined that if he was not to have her, then nobody else would. With his bare hands, he strangled to death the slightly built Joanne Jean Nelson. He appeared his usual self. Back inside his house, he used string to tie together the hands and feet of the lifeless Joanne. He then bundled her body into bin liner bags and secured them with tape. For almost 40 days it lay there, undiscovered and decomposing, as Paul Dyson, we submit, intended it would. He also told the court that on March 24th, Detective Ray Higgins made the most spectacular find of his career when he found the bag containing her bent leg. It's important to note that Paul stated he couldn't recall the location where he abandoned Joanne's body. It took law enforcement nearly 6 weeks to discover her remains, subjecting Joanne's parents and her sisters, 19-year-old Katie and 16-year-old Janie, to unbearable emotional strain. He vaguely recalled leaving her near a metal gate accompanied by a few green bottles. He could also identify some unique trees at the location, which investigators provisionally classified as western hemlock, birch, and hornbeam, all of which are prevalent in North Yorkshire. Detective Superintendent Ray Higgins spearheaded the 6-week search for Joanne, enlisting the help of hundreds of police officers, army men, and volunteers from 3 different counties. During a routine check on one of the search teams with Detective Constable Phil Gadd, he discovered her remains in Bransby, close to York. Quote, "We were driving around and saw this gate. It had everything. We looked at each other and said, 'This is it.' A path from the gate surrounded with green bottles led into a wooded area. The officers proceeded along a path for approximately a quarter of a mile, arriving at a depression in the terrain. Shortly thereafter, they discovered Joanne's body, ensconced in trash bags and concealed beneath branches. Ray commented, 'When Paul was arrested, we hoped the search for Joanne would end, but the nightmare lasted 39 days. For Joanne's family, it must have been unimaginable. Joanne touched many lives. She will not be forgotten.'" Paul was known to be a large man with a big mouth and history of sadistic violence towards women. The court was informed that Paul exhibited murderous intent and failed to attempt resuscitation, summon assistance from neighbors, or call for an ambulance. It was revealed that he visited a nearby corner store to purchase trash bags, rubber gloves, and disinfectant spray. all in an effort to hide her body and eliminate any evidence of the crime at their residence. The court also learned that he drove to his mother's house to retrieve a garden fork for the purpose of burying the body. Upon returning from his mother's, he casually engaged in conversation with a neighboring resident, asking her if she had enjoyed her holiday. He mentioned to the neighbor that he was going to be getting a new cat soon, and when the neighbor asked how Joanne was doing, he replied, "She's fine." It was also revealed that Paul was also abusing steroids when he assaulted his ex-wife, Jenny Clark, on their wedding night. Jenny would say, quote, "He was very troubled when we met. I had had enough after a year and a half of him. I knew when I first saw Joanne, she would have difficulty standing up to him. He was a bully. He told me about his dad a long time after I had met him. It just came out. Paul said he had done his time and paid the price. I did not know what to make of it. It was a shock. It's ironic that he's gone on to kill just like his father. He thought the world of him." She also stated that her daughter Chloe would often ask where her daddy and best friend Joanne was. He reportedly subjected her to regular beatings and once choked her until she lost consciousness. Paul was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 16 years, and Joanne's family could be heard crying. He had previously confessed to manslaughter and while awaiting trial, cut his wrists, writing "sorry" in his blood on the cell wall. Just before his trial was set to start, he changed his plea to guilty for murder. During sentencing at Hull Crown Court, Judge Tom Cracknell informed Paul that he must serve 16 years in prison before being eligible for parole. The judge sentenced the kickboxer for the harm caused to Joanne's family. Quote, "This is grief and torment that is scarcely imaginable." He proceeded to criticize Paul for appearing on television to ask for assistance in locating his fiancée. In response to today's verdict, the Nelson family released a statement that said, quote, "We don't feel sorry for ourselves. We feel sorry for Joanne and the life that she will miss out on. We, her parents, her sisters, and all those who loved her have been cheated. Justice can never be done because Joanne can't come home. But we do consider ourselves lucky and privileged to be able to call Joanne our daughter and our sister." After murdering her and leaving the body 40 miles away, he reported his girlfriend missing on Valentine's Day. Paul earned the nickname Psycho while working as a doorman at a club. However, a source from the gym he frequented in Hull remarked, quote, "Although he used to tell of fights at the doors of pubs and nightclubs where he worked, I think he exaggerated. Maybe his dad was a hard case, but I know Paul as a fantasist rather than a hard man. He would tell his coworkers that he was a ladies' man and use his access to the club in order to talk to the women that went into the venues. His coworkers would describe him as a mouthy and loud person, and Paul constantly spoke about his athletic progress and his physique. Joanne, however, was known by friends and family to be bright, bubbly, and passionate. She was a sportswoman that loved netball, swimming, and rounders. Originally, she trained to be a nurse but found it to be too emotional, stating that when she saw sick patients, she would cry and head home. Soon after, she was accepted by voluntary service overseas to work in Ghana, but instead she worked at a job center in Hull. Her co-workers told the Yorkshire Post that she always went out of her way to do things for people, and that the photos the press have posted since her death do not do her beauty justice. Her funeral had 200 mourners, and her 19-year-old sister Katie paid tribute to her sister and left her friends and family in tears. Quote, "Anyone who knew Joanne knew she was a wonderful person. She was fun, loving, high on life, and bubbly. She was always the good one. So it's hard to understand why something like this has happened to her. She was my big sister, always looking out for me and taught me what was right and wrong. I didn't always take notice of her, but she was always right." In tears, she added, "I miss you so much. I wish I could give you one last kiss, one last hug, but I will be kissing you and hugging you forever." I can't imagine how Joanne felt in her final moments, especially if this really did happen on Valentine's Day or even the day before. I think I speak for all women when I say that every girl wants a super romantic Valentine's Day and they want their partner to be super loving and I'm just thinking about how excited she must have been to give him a card or a gift and just spend that quality time with him. And I also can't imagine how her family and friends feel because they thought that they knew him and that their daughter might have found the one. The whole situation is just very, very sad. And I hope that her family feels that they got some sense of justice. As always, all evidence will be linked in the show notes. Feel free to follow our Instagram at Murder Tapes Podcast and my personal at Annalisa. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you on the next one.